morning, and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folarin. Today, let's talk money, but, well, not really money in that sense. Yeah, really money in that sense. Everything is expensive. Why are things expensive? Well, the dollar is in there. People will say so. Some of us are saying, so what concerns the dollar with, my just going to a canteen and what I used to be able to do with 1,000 naira, I now need somewhere in the region of 1,500 to 2,000 naira to do the same thing in the canteen, to bring it down to the mundane level for understanding. Well, we got, economist, financial expert, Mr. Johnson Chukwu, CEO, Cowrie Assets. He's our guest today, and he'll help us look at this whole matter and try and get us to have a better understanding of the Naira devaluation and debt servicing, how these two link together. A fine morning to you, Mr. Johnson Chukwu.
Thank you, Uncle Yuri, for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. It's our pleasure. Maybe let's just start at the basics. Let's not leave this to just the financial pundits and the financial experts alone. Let's sort of include the rest of us in understanding this. First of all, Naira devaluation. Before we even come to debt servicing, Naira devaluation is what a country does to itself. A country decides to make its currency cheaper for strategic reasons. Explain that to us, because that has implications. Our currency is cheaper to outsiders. Tell us the sense of that.
Okay, I will take it from two perspectives. Yes, one of the strategies for managing your export and import bills is to make your currency to be cheap. When a country does that, it's simply what it does simply does is makes imports more expensive so that the citizen will not be importing so much of foreign goods or will not be consuming so much of foreign goods. And it makes its export cheap for those who are importing it from other countries. What that means is that a unit of the country's export in terms of dollar terms will be cheaper. And that way, it will encourage foreigners to import, to buy more goods from that country. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it, where the devaluation is forced by economic circumstances.
Okay.
In that instance, you don't have enough foreign exchange to meet the demand for imports. So your currency will devalue because you don't have enough of those currencies to exchange. You don't have enough dollars to exchange for the goods you are importing. And therefore, you have to pay more naira to buy to exchange for fewer dollars. So that is forced. But the one you refer to is self-induced, and it only happens where a country has so much of things to export. What you refer to, and therefore, it wants people to buy those things from other countries at cheaper rates, and that's when it goes into self-induced devaluation.
Okay.
But what Nigeria is facing is not self-induced. Is a compulsive or what we call compelled devaluation.
We don't have any option because, as you've just explained, when we find ourselves without the resources necessary to continue as usual, then that's the compulsion that you were talking about. So it's not so much that we used it as a device, as you have said, it can be done in other instances. So where does this situate us? It's like we are being, quote unquote, by forced into this tough measure.
Well, yes, like rightly just said now, we are forced to devalue. Where does this situate us? The challenge we have to deal with is that, one, we can no longer import as much as we used to import because we all in Naira. Naira, local currency, is our medium of exchange. Is our currency, primary currency. So that's what we all earn. So when you have a devaluation like the type we're having today, it then means you and I, an average household, can no longer afford the same quantity of import goods that they used to import or consume. And when you talk of that, it's not just, I have avoided the word of what they used to imported goods. It affects every commodity within the economy. And how does it affect every commodity within the economy? Every commodity in the economy has some components of foreign input. It may look funny. For instance, you could say, what does Gary what input does Gary have to, or yam tuber has to import component. Remember that the Gary we eat here, or the bar we eat here, and most of the tubers we eat are coming from places like Benue, Taraba, and North Central and Northeast. But those food items have to be transported to Lagos that you and I live in, and where we consume those things. The vehicles that they use to transport them are imported. The fuel that they use to, or diesel that they use to power those vehicles are imported. So if the price of fuel goes up, the person who is the transporter will increase his transport cost. So the person who is bringing yam to Lagos will charge more because he has paid higher transport costs. And that higher transport cost was induced because Naira had devalued. The person who had the vehicle will charge more for the haulage or the transportation because he has paid more, or he will need to pay more to replace the vehicle or to even buy the parts. So you can see even the yam that we say is homegrown, or the eba that is homegrown, has some component of foreign inputs. And that's why when you have a material devaluation, it affects almost every commodity in your economy.
Indeed. And that's why, I suppose, they preach the sermon of buy Nigeria, eat Nigeria, just do everything Nigeria as much as possible. But you've explained how it's really not very possible to, there will be some component that is foreign, especially in a country like ours, where our taste is such that we've come to virtually depend on imports, even where it isn't essential. The Nigerian taste has been such that we have always been laid open to this. Now, all of this that you've explained is going to constrain the government's ability to go about its business, so won't it? The fiscal space, as you say, is going to constrain that a bit. Government might not, if these things get bad enough, might not be able to pay for its services and its needs to function as a government. So it does look like a pretty dangerous occurrence unless something is done to radically boost revenue, I guess.
Yes, okay. What you have asked now also veers towards the issue of government revenue. Okay, let me properly put a closure to the issue of FX.
Okay.
For the government, they are affected by those items that they have to import. In the case of fuel, where the government is now paying subsidy for fuel, because the pump price, the price at which we buy the fuel at the pump head is lower than the price at which they land because Naira has devalued. So the government has to absorb part of that cost. Then there are also other government expenditure that are foreign, like the foreign component. But beyond that, the government, interestingly, has been a beneficiary of the devaluation. I tell you what has happened. You remember that the government, at the end of every month, shares a federation allocation. And that federation allocation, a critical component of its earnings from crude oil sales. And crude oil sales is made in dollars. So the government earns dollars. Now they have to convert the dollar at a higher exchange rate. And therefore, the Naira amount they share, it has actually increased. So for the government, they are actually the beneficiaries of the devaluation because they have not increased the salaries of you and I to reflect the increase in exchange rates. So in effect, the governments in Nigeria, the three-tier government, are in better position to meet their obligations as a result of the devaluation. But I understand where you are tending towards, which is that we could have a challenge with some obligations. For instance, the federal government is owing, just like some other state government, but principally the federal government owes a lot of foreign currency denominated loans. So it needs to earn enough dollars or share its own share of enough of allocation is to be sufficient enough for it to be able to meet those interest payment obligations on foreign currency debts. So that's the component that may have the government constrained. But in terms of revenue, what the government is enjoying is a boost. And that's why if you look at the federation allocation, you are seeing allocations in the region of 1 trillion naira being shared in a single month, which was never the case.
Yes.
Because the impact of the allocation is that the government now has more naira to share. And that should also mean that they are meeting their local currency obligations, paying salaries in local currencies and running their overhead in local currencies is actually strengthened.
So they're actually gaining on that account. But should you, once you come in, since we're dealing with it locally now, as you've just explained, and government is actually, quote unquote, benefiting from all of this, should there then be a component of the citizenry or the business that requires, foreign currency? It is going to be buying it at a very high cost, right? Since this
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, since you've just explained that, exports will become cheaper, but imports will become much more expensive.
Yes, unfortunately for us as a country, we are in a very unusual situation. And what I mean by unusual situation, for an average household, in countries like China, where many households have some export business, then when you have the kind of devaluation or depreciation of the local currency, now an average household in China will ordinarily benefit because most households have some level of product they are exporting. Quite unlike here, Nigerians do not have so much of export commodities, principally because of some structural deficiencies in the economy. We can't produce efficiently in terms of quality and in terms of cost. So because we can't produce efficiently or competitively, so that whatever we produce here can compete with what is produced elsewhere in terms of quality, in terms of cost, then a devaluation does not give Nigeria the benefit of more exports. We are still stuck with only exporting crude. If you look at the MBS trade report, you realize that crude oil export was 82.5%. And then export of gas, obviously from LNG, was another 9.8%. So if you add the two, the total export from crude and crude oil related activities were 92.3%. So leaving only just about 7.3% of every other commodity that we have to export. So for that reason, we don't get, an average household is not getting the benefit of the devaluation. If we are exporting several commodities, several value-added commodities, then this devaluation would have meant you and I are producing, maybe I'm making clothes and I can export it to Ghana or Uganda or England. So what I will now have a demand for higher quantity of what I make to export. But unfortunately, we are not in that situation. We are in an unusual situation in terms of the economics of international trade, because we don't have a local economy that is productive enough as to export value-added products.
And that really is all of this one that the president, as you know, has been very, very active in terms of trying to secure investments for Nigeria. All of us know that they talk about making it, making the ease of business, doing business in Nigeria even higher than it used to be. All of that, where is all of that leading to? Because the only thing that the ordinary Nigerian sees, and you've explained that, government now has a lot of Naira because of the phenomenon that you've explained to continue to do what it is doing. But life is getting tighter and tighter for the ordinary citizen. You people talk about food inflation. Prices are just going through the roof. So it does seem that in spite of all the efforts, we are told that, look, what the president and his economic team are doing, that, look, you won't see an immediate improvement. But in the short to medium term, perhaps even much more in the medium term, we'll begin to see some sort of relief, some succor. But in the meantime, when we add our caption today, devaluation and debt servicing, I suppose debt servicing will also add another weight on the already tough situation.
Yes. Okay. Before I come to the debt service angle, let me mention something on the drive for foreign investment, because we are all stakeholders in this commonwealth of the country, in the Nigerian Commonwealth. So we all have a duty to possibly speak to the government so that if there are things they are not doing right, they can correct it. I think the first thing we need to do is focus on the heavy lifting. But before you even look at the heavy lifting, we need to first retain those who are here. I'm sure you are aware that GSK has left the country, and only this week, Procter & Gamble, P&G, announce they are leaving the country. That it's difficult to actually create dollar wealth in the country. So in effect, what they're saying is that when you try to make something, the devaluation will wipe it out. So the first thing we need to do as a country, in the president's drive to encourage foreign direct investment in the country, is to sustain the operation or the interest of those who are currently in the country. The reality between you and Uncle Yori, if you are going to a place and everybody's running away from there, I don't know what will encourage you to go there. So when we're witnessing time, we are seeing an exit of existing foreign investors in the country. We've seen the likes of Game leave. We've seen several of them leave in the past couple of years. And we thought that has been stemmed. But we are seeing the manufacturing. It takes a lot. I remember when P&G came to the country in the 2000s. I was doing my MBA at Lagos Business School then, and it was a source of a celebration for us because we felt that they will, obviously, their coming will encourage us to come in. But if they are leaving, then the efforts of the president to attract investors will be challenged because those investors will ask existing investors, why are you leaving? And they will tell them that the Nigerian environment is not conducive for foreign direct investment. So having said that, I think that should be the priority of the government to sustain, find out where those people are living, and possibly reverse whatever is causing them to leave. Then we now focus on the heavy lifting, providing the necessary infrastructure and regulatory as well as policy support to businesses so that they can have motivations to come here. Now, going to the issue of debt service. Today, if you look at the federal government budget for 2024, the government has made provision of about 8.25 trillion naira as debt service. At the same time, the government has budgeted that it will earn revenues of 18.2 trillion. But if you consider that in the first 9 months of this year, the government revenue was just about 8.6 trillion naira. So if the government made the first 9 months of this year 8.6 trillion naira, if you use that run rate about 955 billion every month, the government will end this year at about 11.5 trillion. And debt service has already been provided to at 8.25 trillion. So if we earn about what we earn this year, next year, we will end up spending more than 85%, or more than about 85% or 80% of our total revenue on debt service. And remember, the government will borrow further. This year had made a provision for, next year, 2024, had made a provision for 9.18 trillion naira in budget deficit. It tends to borrow about 7.8 trillion naira, obviously from commercial lenders, and then another 1 trillion naira drawing from existing lines that have been granted by multilateral agencies. So if you add those two, you're already about 9 trillion. So if he borrows additional 9 trillion, he has to pay interest on that. So if you add that interest to the existing provision about 8.25 trillion naira, you may end up with something like, which is what we are worried, that we may end up with total debt service to revenue of close to 100%. The challenge with that is that the government does not have any headroom to do infrastructure, to invest in social goods. Currently, if you look at that budget, the total provision for the current expenditure is 9.2 trillion naira, 9.92 trillion naira. Then if you add it to the debt service of 8.25 trillion, you're going to have 18.17 trillion naira. So which then means that the entire amount that the government will earn, if it succeeds in earning 18.2 trillion, will be spent on the current expenditure and debt service. The provision of 8.7 trillion naira the government has for capital expenditure will be entirely borrowed. In the first 9 months of this year, the government only spent 1.47 trillion naira on capital expenditure out of about 11 trillion naira it spent so far. About 12 trillion naira, 12.4 trillion naira it had so far spent. It only spent 1.4 trillion on capital expenditure, which is why we are not developing. Because debt service and government economic expenditure is wiping out every government revenue. So every kobo that they spend on capital projects, which is the critical investment you need to make your economy attractive, to make life easy for the citizens, is borrowed. And that's across our problem.
Wow. Wow. In the meantime, one moment, please. There's something I want to return to in what you said, but first of all, let me bring in Fidel, who has called in from Owerri. Good morning, Fidel.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure getting you. You see, we have to do certain things, give priority to certain things in this country. A situation where we are battling with insecurity and other things that can scare investors, and we've not handled it as expected. We have some companies, and we're allowing them to go. It is not advisable. It is very, very inappropriate and improper. We must do everything to at least retain the companies that are operating here in the country, where we make efforts to create more conducive atmosphere for other investors to come in. Let us save what we have at hand and think of other ways of getting more investors into the country. If not, we are crumbling the economy and it will get worse. Thank you and God bless you. I'm Fidel Onyeneke.
Thank you very much, Fidel, for calling in. And, you know, Johnson, Fidel took us to where I wanted to get further commentary from you. You spoke about P&G, Procter & Gamble, leaving. I think part of the, I read online that what they're going to be doing now is that they're going to concentrate on importing, on the import side of their business. All the manufacturing, they just had to leave. And that was worrying that you're leaving. They say the implication of that is about 5,000 jobs were probably on the line. But maybe just with that, those additional points, you could address what Fidel from Owerri also said.
Thank you. You know, that's why I say that the first focus of the presidency or the president should be to retain existing businesses before you go and look for new ones, because no new one will come when everybody's running away. The questions you ask yourself, what are the reasons why these people are leaving? For every investor, foreign direct investor that leaves, it takes a lot of decisions for them to do that, because they have invested in physical infrastructure. P&G has a factory in it, but I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yes.
Massive factory. They will be abandoning it. They invested money to it, to build it. And they want to now begin to export their products to the country. Look at GSK. This morning, when I was leaving the house, my wife brought augmentin and showed me that this augmentin, a couple of months ago, she bought it for 12,000 naira. That is now going for 60,000 naira. The reason simply that product has to now be imported into the country, unlike when it was produced here. So an average household is going to suffer more. The basic product that P&G was producing will cost more when we begin to import it, because they are going to command foreign labor. Not only that, the Nigerians who are working there are all going to lose their jobs.
Yes.
The income, household income of those average Nigerians will go to the floor. The family member they are supporting, because Nigerian, we have an extended family structure.
That's right.
Probably you have the 5 working there. They have cousins who are in school because they're working in P&G. So those students will also suffer because their breadwinners, their primary breadwinners will lose their income. The taxes that these people pay to government will also be lost. So you have multiplicity of the losses that the economy suffers when you have a major industrial producer leaving your country. So the primary objective of government going outside to scout for and to win investors, they can come and invest and create those jobs and domesticate production. But not only that, you also have technological transfer. Because if you have more of these companies producing here, the Nigerians will learn from them, start their own manufacturing outfits, and copy what these people are doing, which is what happened in China. It's happening today in Thailand. It's happening today in Vietnam. But unfortunately, the reverse is the case in the country. Okay. So we need to ask ourselves, why are these companies leaving? And we must do whatever is required to make sure they stop leaving.
Exactly. Not just why are they leaving, why are we letting them go might be the simplistic question that I suppose those technocrats in government will need to answer. Reverend Dominic, good morning to you, sir, and thank you for holding on for a bit. Go ahead now.
Good morning. It's like my question has been questioned. Let me make this point. Thank you for your guest. Your guest is a man from the southeast. That's Dr. Chukwu. Now, I want Chukwu to understand what I want to say. As an Igbo man, Dr. Chukwu, you as an Igbo man where to go to make money. An Igbo man sniffs like a cat. Whatever he sees opportunity, he goes. He don't invite him. Why I'm saying this is this. I'm also maybe part of this economy. We used to have 3-hour service every Sunday. We're not doing 1 hour 30 minutes because we are buying diesel 1,250 naira. So what will you use to do 1,050, 250 naira a liter of diesel? And the money...
Oh dear. It's affecting everything, even the house of the Lord.